Ladies, let's talk. You've probably been there. Eyes wide open, heart already halfway in, telling yourself, well, and nobody's perfect. And while that's true, there's a difference between imperfect and dangerous for your peace. Because here's the true thing, red flags aren't just signs. They are warnings. Warnings that whisper at first and scream later. So let's stop romanticizing potential. Let's stop trying to rewrite someone's character with the ink of hope. And instead, let's get clear about what we should never ignore. He dismisses your feelings. If every time you bring up something that bothers you, he rolls his eyes, laughs it off, or calls you too sensitive, run. You're not too much. You're asking for a basic level of emotional safety. And if a man can't handle a conversation about feelings, he's not ready for a relationship. He's ready for control. Inconsistency. One day he's hot, the next he's cold. He's all in when it's convenient, but disappears when it matters. That's not mystery. That's immaturity. Love doesn't have to feel like chasing someone who's constantly walking just a few steps ahead of you. He talks badly about every ex. Now listen, no one's past is perfect, but if every ex of his crazy, toxic, or clingy, ask yourself this, what's the common denominator? A man who never owns his part in past relationships is telling you something loud and clear. He's not self-aware. And when things go wrong with you, and eventually something will, he's not going to take responsibility then either. He makes you feel small. Pay attention to how you feel when you're around him. Do you feel inspired, lifted, energized? Or do you find yourself second guessing your worth? Trying harder to prove yourself, shrinking to make him more comfortable. A man who's intimidated by your shine will dim your light and call it love. You're doing all the emotional labor. Are you the one planning the dates, initiating the texts, carrying the hard conversations, always trying to fix things? That's not love. That's emotional exhaustion. You weren't born to be someone's emotional life support. Relationships are partnerships, not rescue missions. And here's the biggest red flag of all your intuition is waving the red flag, and you keep folding it into a white one. You know, even when you try to ignore it, even when your friends try to stay polite, even when you distract yourself, there's that quiet voice in you saying, this isn't right. That voice is not your fear. That's your wisdom. And let me say this with loving you, do not need more proof. You do not need to wait for things to get worse. You are not hosking too much. The right man will never make you question your value. He will see you, hear you, and show up consistently, not just when it's convenient, but when it matters. So here's your challenge. Stop seeing red flags as something to fix. Start seeing them as your cue to walk, because you are not here to convince someone to treat you right. You are here to be cherished, fully, freely, without conditions. Know your worth, and never apologize for expecting more. Let's be honest, no relationship is perfect. Disagreements happen. Misunderstandings happen. But there's one specific behavior that should never, ever be brushed under the rug. And that's when a man consistently dismisses your feelings. You know the moment I'm talking about. You finally work up the courage to express how something made you feel. Maybe he said something hurtful. Maybe he cancelled on you last minute. Maybe he's been distant lately. And instead of leaning in, listening, and taking it seriously, he laughs. He calls you dramatic. He says you're making a big deal out of nothing. Or maybe worse it, he makes you the problem. This always happens with you. You're too sensitive. Why can't you just relax? Let me tell you something. That is emotional gaslighting dressed up as chill. Because the moment someone invalidates how you feel, they're not just disagreeing. They're telling you that your experience doesn't matter, that your perspective is inconvenient. And over time, that does real damage. You start second guessing yourself. You start apologizing for things that weren't wrong. You stop bringing things up just to keep the peace. That's not love. That's silence by survival. And here's where it gets even more dangerous. When we care about someone, we want to believe they didn't mean it. We tell ourselves things like, well, maybe I'm overthinking, or he's just not good with emotions. But that's the trap. We end up explaining away behavior that actually explains everything we need to know. A man who values you, even if he doesn't fully understand your feelings right away, will care enough to try. He'll ask questions. He'll slow down. He'll say, help me understand what upset you. Not because he has to agree with everything, but because he respects your inner world enough to want to meet you in it. That's what emotional safety looks like. It's not perfection, it's presence. You don't have to walk on eggshells. You don't have to rehearse your words 5 times in your head before speaking. You don't have to bottle things up just to avoid being called too much. When you're with the right man, you can say what's real for you and be heard, not judged. Now, let's get brutally honest for a second. If someone is dismissing your feelings at the start, when everything is supposed to be at its best, when he's still trying to impress you, what happens 6 months from now? A year, when life gets harder and stakes are higher? This is why ignoring this red flag is so costly. We're taught to give people the benefit of the doubt. But here's the truth. You don't owe endless compassion to someone who shows consistent disregard. You're not being too sensitive. You're being aware. You're tuning into the discomfort instead of shutting it down. That's strength, not weakness. And the moment you feel you have to justify or defend your emotions to someone over and over again just to get basic understanding, that's the moment you need to stop asking, how do I make him see? And start asking, why am I trying so hard for someone who doesn't want to see? Because here's what love is, and I want you to hear this with your whole hearting. Love is not where you have to prove your pain. Love is where your pain is seen, and someone leans closer. And don't fall for the myth that emotional validation is just a nice to. Haves nots. It's foundational. It's the soil that trust, intimacy, and connection grow from. A man who shuts you down emotionally doesn't make you stronger. He makes you shrink. And a relationship that requires you to mute your feelings isn't safe. It's slow erosion. So if you've been wondering whether it's too soon to bring something up, if you've been holding in your truth because you don't want to push him away, let me ask you this. What kind of connection are you protecting? One that can't even hold space for your honesty. You deserve better than that. You deserve to be heard fully. You deserve someone who says, tell me more, not, here we go again. You deserve someone who listens when you speak, not someone who makes you feel like silence is your safest option. Never forget this. The right man doesn't make you feel like you're too much. He makes you feel like you've finally come home. Let's talk about something that confuses a lot of people: inconsistency. You meet a guy. At first, it's magic. He's texting all day, calling at night, planning the next date before the first one ends. You feel seen, chosen, excited. There's chemistry, charm, that electric connection. Something shifts. Suddenly, the messages slow down. He takes longer to reply. He's still there, kind of just less. He doesn't disappear entirely, but the energy isn't the same. The effort feels half-hearted. He becomes a magician. Now you see him, now you don't. And what do? You try to make sense of it. You ask your friends, do you think he's just busy? You tell yourself, maybe he just needs space, or he's not great at texting. But deep down, you feel it, that subtle anxiety, that emotional whiplash. Here's the truth that's hard to swallow, but freeing once you accept it's you. When someone is inconsistent, they're showing you who they are, not playing hard to get. And it's not some deep, mysterious game. It's actually really simply he's not ready, or he's not that invested, or he's not emotionally mature enough to handle the kind of relationship you're ready for. Inconsistency is not mystery, it's immaturity. Or, at best, emotional laziness. Consistency isn't boring. It's clarity. It's emotional stability. It says, I know what I want, and I show up for it. That's not needy. That's healthy. But we've been fed this idea that love should feel like a roller coaster, that the highs and lows are what make it passionate, that the butterflies are a sign of something real. No, the butterflies you're feeling, that's anxiety, not loved. And when someone gives you just enough to keep you hooked, but not enough to feel secure, that's not romance, that's control. That's them keeping the door open just wide enough so you don't leave, but not stepping fully into it either. It's emotional breadcrumbing. And if you're constantly wondering where you stand, constantly overanalyzing the gap between what he says and what he does, then you're not in a relationship. You're in a guessing game. And guess what? You lose either way. Now, let's say he does come back around. Maybe he disappears for days and then drops a, hey, miss you, text. Your heart skips. Seek. He cares. But that's not real connection. That's a dopamine hit. A ping that resets the cycle. And every time you respond, you reinforce the idea that his inconsistency is acceptable. Here's the standard: if someone can be consistent when they want something from you, your attention, your affection, your time, but they can't maintain it once they feel safe or once you start to matter morig, that's not love, that's ego, that's convenience. You deserve better than someone whose effort expires after the honeymoon phase. A person who's serious about you doesn't create confusion. They remove it. You don't have to chase them. You don't have to decipher cryptic behavior. You don't have to lower your needs to keep their attention. Think of it this way. Do you want a love that's only present when it's easy, or one that shows up when it matters? Because the guy who's excited to text you all day at the beginning, that's easy. Anyone can do that. But the one who stays consistent when real life hits, when emotions surface, when routines settle, that's where real intimacy begins. So, if you're seeing inconsistency, don't make excuses. Don't build a future based on the best moments if the rest is uncertainty. Don't confuse potential with reliability. It's not your job to chase clarity. It's not your job to inspire someone to show up. And it's definitely not job to accept crumbs in the hope they turn into a full meal. You are not hard to love. You are not asking for too much. You're just finally ready to stop accepting less. So the next time you feel tempted to romanticize the unpredictability, ask yourself this: do I feel more secured or more anxious around him? Because if it's the second, then that's not your person. And you already know what to do. Walk away from inconsistency and walk toward peace. Because love shouldn't feel like a puzzle. It should feel like home. We've all been on those dates where the topic of exes comes up. It's pretty normal. After all, we all have a past. But here's where you want to listen carefully, not just to what he says, but how he says it. If every single one of his exes was crazy, toxic, needy, or manipulative, let me tell you something, you're not getting the full story. You're getting a carefully edited highlight reel designed to make him the victim every single time. And that should be a giant waving neon red flag, because no one has a perfect track record in relationships. If you've been in more than one, it means you've made mistakes. We all have. The only real question is, what did you learn from them? And how did you grow because of them? But when a man talks about every ex like they were a villain in his story, what he's telling you isn't that he dated difficult people. What he's telling you is that he hasn't done the self-reflection to grow. He's not emotionally evolved enough to say, Yeah, we had our issues. Or, I didn't always handle things well either. He's not strong enough to own his side of the story. And if he hasn't done that with them, what makes you think he'll do it with you? Because here's the pattern, and I want you to catch this before it catches you. If every ex is the bad guy, eventually you will be too. The moment things get hard, the moment you show emotion, express a need, or challenge something he does, guess who suddenly becomes the next crazy one? That's not a partner. That's a man who weaponizes blame to protect his ego. And it's easy, right? It's easy to get caught in the trap of being the one who finally understands him. He says, "You're not like the others." And part of you lights up. You think, "I'm the exception." But the moment someone puts all their past relationship failures on the shoulders of other people, they're not building connection. They're building a pedestal. And pedestals are not stable places to stand. Because the minute you fall off, the minute you show you're human, the same story starts all over again. Let me be really clear about something. There's a difference between having one difficult relationship and taking time to heal from it, and having a pattern of unhealthy relationships and taking zero accountability for it. One is healing, the other is avoidance. And when someone avoids the hard truth about who they were in past relationships, they will absolutely avoid the hard work in their next one. You want someone who can reflect, who can be honest, who can say, "Yeah, I made mistakes." Or, "That breakup taught me something." That kind of man. He's done the inner work. He's not afraid to own his past because he's actually learned from it. But a man who only talks about what was done to him, that's a man who still sees himself as a passenger in his own life. And trust me, you don't want to be in the passenger seat when someone else is driving without a map. So if you're with someone who speaks with bitterness, who mocks or blames all his exes, who tells you everyone before you was a disaster, don't ignore that. That's not just a history lesson. That's a preview. Because if someone can't speak about their past with maturity and humility, they're not going to handle conflict with you maturely either. They're going to deflect, blame, gaslight, shut down. That's not a relationship. That's an emotional landmine. And you don't need to step carefully through one else's unresolved baggage, hoping not to set it off. You need a partner who's unpacked it, dealt with it, and is ready to carry a future with you, not project the past onto you. So the next time you hear, "All my exes were crazy," remember this. It's not your job to prove you're different. It's your job to notice the pattern and choose better. Because love doesn't live in blame. Love lives in growth. And someone who's done the work will never need to tear others down to lift themselves up. You've met him. He's charming, charismatic, and maybe even gives you those butterflies at first. But somewhere along the way, something starts to feel off. It's not obvious at first. Maybe it's subtle. A small comment or the way he looks at you when you share something personal. But the longer you spend with him, the more you notice it. You start feeling smaller, not physically, but emotionally. You feel like you're shrinking to make room for him. You find yourself second guessing your worth or holding back parts of yourself just to keep things smooth. You think to yourself, is this just what relationships are like? Or maybe I'm just being too sensitive, but deep down, you know something's off. And it's time we get real about it. If you feel smaller around him, that's a problem. It's one thing to meet someone who's confident, self-assured, and comfortable in their own skin. That's attractive. But it's another thing entirely when you start to feel like you have to shrink, dull your shine, or silence parts of yourself just to make them feel comfortable. You shouldn't feel like you need to apologize for your brilliance. Who's You shouldn't feel like you're too much. You're never too much. A man who makes you feel smaller isn't the one for you. And this doesn't always happen in grand gestures or obvious ways. It often shows up in those quiet, everyday moments. Maybe he mocks your interests or laughs at something you care about. Maybe he belittles your accomplishments, saying things like, "Oh, that's nice, but I don't think it's as big of a deal as you think." Or maybe he makes you second guess your decisions. Like, "Are you sure you want to do that? I don't know who that. I think you might be making a mistake." It can even show up in the way he reacts when you share something vulnerable. Instead of validating your feelings, he dismisses them with a quick, "You're overthinking." Or worse, "That's not a big deal." And let's not forget how some men will subtly undercut your self-worth by constantly talking about how much they're not like other guys, as if that's some kind of badge of honor. Sure, on the surface it seems flattering, but what it really means is, I need you to see me as exceptional in comparison to everyone else. So you'll keep thinking I'm special while you doubt whether you're enough. It's a subtle form of manipulation, and it works. Because the more you second guess yourself, the more you make room for him to feel like the authority in the relationship. Here's the thing: a healthy relationship should make you feel more like yourself, not less. When you're with someone who truly values you, they celebrate, they elevate you, they see your worth and remind you of it when you forget. They don't question your decisions, they support them. They don't make fun of your passions, they encourage them. And when you're feeling uncertain, they stand by you, not in judgment, but in support. But the guy who makes you feel small, who questions your worth, who tries to dominate the space you occupy, he's not the one. He's the one who's threatened by your shine, and instead of lifting himself up, he pulls you down. If you're starting to feel like you need to shrink yourself to keep his attention, to keep him from getting too uncomfortable, stop. That's not love, that's fear. It's the fear of losing someone who doesn't actually see you for who you are, but for who he needs you to be for his comfort. And here's the truth: you're not here to make Elsa feel secure. You're here to be seen, fully, completely, without apology. So why do we let ourselves shrink for someone who isn't even offering the space we need to grow? I get it. You want to be liked. You want to connect. But you can't connect with someone who doesn't accept you as you are. You can't build a lasting, fulfilling relationship with someone who tries to make you feel like you're too much or too little at the same time. It's exhausting. It's draining. And eventually you'll find yourself asking, why am I losing myself in this? The right man will never make you feel like you're too much to handle. He won't ask you to dim your light so he can shine. Instead, he'll ask you to shine brighter, and he'll be right there alongside you, doing the same, because he knows that when both of you bring your full selves to the table, the relationship will only get stronger. He won't try to make you feel small because he's secure enough in who he is to let you be exactly who you are. So if you're shrinking around him, if you feel like you're losing yourself bit by bit, it's time to walk away. Not because he's bad, but because you deserve better. You deserve someone who doesn't just accept you, but celebrates you in all your fullness. The moment you start shrinking to make someone else feel bigger is the moment you stop honoring the most important person in the room. Let's talk about something that's at the heart of every relationship: effort. It's not the grand gestures, the flowers, or the surprise dates that will tell you whether this is the right relationship for you. It's the day-to-day effort, the consistent, genuine effort. Because when it's one-sided, when you're the only one doing the work, you're setting yourself up for a one-sided connection. Think about it. You're always the one reaching out first, always the one checking in, always the one making plans. You're the one who's emotionally invested, doing the heavy lifting. You find yourself constantly wondering, why does it feel like I'm the one who's always trying? And it leaves you feeling exhausted, undervalued, and ultimately unsure about where you stand. You don't need to constantly question where the relationship is going. Relationships thrive on reciprocity. There should be mutual effort. And that doesn't mean you're both doing the same thing all the time, but it does mean you're both present. You're both putting in the emotional labor, the time, the care. Now, I get it. Relationships take different forms. Some people are quieter. Some show love in subtler ways. But if you're the one always initiating conversations, always asking questions, always figuring out what's wrong when things are off, and they're just waiting for you to make the effort, that's not balance, that's imbalance. And here's the thing, the reason it feels so draining is because you're carrying the weight for both of you. You're holding the emotional space, trying to make sure everything is okay, all while feeling like you're putting more into this than they are. It's like running a marathon with a weight on your back. You might make it to the end, but you're going to be wiped out by the time you do. This isn't about perfection. It's about consistent effort. And effort is a reflection of commitment. The more someone is invested in you and the relationship, the more they will naturally show up. Not just when it's easy or when they feel like it, but when it's needed. They'll show up emotionally. They'll be present. They'll care about your needs. And they'll make you feel like you're just as important as they are. But if you're the one constantly doing the work, making sure the connection stays alive, pushing to communicate, always thinking of ways to improve things, you're not in a partnership, you're in a transaction. Think of it this way. If a man is only putting in the bare minimum or only showing up when it's convenient for him, what he's really saying is, I'm not fully committed to this. I'm not invested in you in the way that you deserve. This isn't just about effort in the relationship either. It's about how he makes you feel. It's how you feel when you're around him. You should never feel like you're giving more than what you're receiving. And when the effort is one-sided, when you're carrying the emotional weight of the relationship, you start to feel unseen. You start to wonder if you matter as much as you think you do. And over time, that can erode your self-esteem. If you're the one always putting in the effort, it's time to stop and ask yourself, why? Why are you the one making all the moves? Why are you the one giving more than you're getting? Because the truth is, relationships supposed to be a two-way street, not a one-way road. If you're constantly texting, always planning dates, always wondering where he's at emotionally, then you're in a relationship with a ghost. You're investing your time, your energy, and your heart into something that isn't returning that energy back. And trust me, no matter how much you want it to work, no matter how much you love the idea of him or the potential of what the relationship could be, you'll burn out. Real love is mutual. It's not just about you doing everything and hoping he catches up. It's not about giving all of yourself while he's still sitting on the sidelines. It's about both of you showing up, both of you taking turns doing the hard work, both of you being equally present in the relationship. So what do you do when you realize the effort isn't being reciprocated? You pull back, you stop chasing, you stop overcompensating, because the moment you stop being the only one putting in the effort, you make space for someone who will. You make space for someone who values you enough to give you what you give. You make space for someone who will show up. And here's the beauty of it, Teg. When you stop chasing, when you stop putting all your emotional energy into something that's only one-sided, you give yourself permission to heal, to grow, to receive the love you deserve. And when the right person does show up, And they will. They won't have to be asked to put in the effort. They'll do it because they want to. They'll do it because they see your value, and you'll never have to question if they're all in. You'll know because they'll be showing up right alongside you. Let's talk about something that's harder than it sounds. So prioritization. It's one of those things that sounds simple, but when you're in a relationship, it can be difficult to recognize until it's too late. We all want to feel like we matter. We want to feel seen, respected, and most importantly, prioritized. But here's the thing that's often overlooked in relationships: action speaks louder than words. If a guy really prioritizes you, you'll feel it. He doesn't just say it, he shows it. And here's the kicker: if you're constantly finding yourself at the bottom of his to-do list, if you're being left on red, if you're always the one who has to adjust your schedule to fit him in, then stop making excuses for him. It's easy to justify his actions when you want something to work. You tell yourself he's just busy, or he has a lot on his plate. And maybe he does. We all have things to juggle, but listen closely because this is important. Someone who truly values you finds time for you. They make space in their life for you. They don't just throw you a bone when it's convenient. They show up consistently, not just when it works for them. And if you're the one always accommodating, always adjusting your life for him, always letting him decide when and how often you'll see each other, you have to stop and ask yourself, what does this say about his level of commitment? If you're constantly making excuses like, he's just going through a tough time, or maybe he's not that great at texting, you're giving him permission to keep showing up less than you deserve. And here's the reality: if he really wants to be with you, he will show you. You'll never be wondering where you stand, because he'll make sure you know. Let's break this down. When someone prioritizes you, it's not just about how many times they text or how quickly they respond. It's about how they show up in your life. They make sure to check in. They carve out time for you, and they value your presence enough to give you their energy. You don't have to fight for it. It's just there, effortlessly, naturally. Now, I'm not talking about perfection. We all get busy. Life happens. But I want you to listen to this. Someone who is emotionally invested in you will find a way to make time for you. They will adjust their schedule. They will communicate, and they will show up when it matters. If you find yourself waiting for a text, wondering when you'll get the next opportunity to hang out, or feeling like you're always the one putting in all the effort, then ask yourself, is this the kind of relationship I want? The biggest mistake you can make is continuing to make excuses for someone who isn't prioritizing you. Maybe next time he'll be better. Maybe he's just overwhelmed with work. He didn't mean to hurt me. We've all been there. And I get it. You want to believe that things will change. You want to think that with a little patience, he'll come around. But here's the true thing. You teach people how to treat you. And the more you let things slide, the more you show them that you'll settle for less. It doesn't matter how much you like someone or how great the potential of the relationship feels. If he's not making you a priority, it's time to stop excusing it. When someone truly cares about you, they make you feel like you're important. They don't leave you wondering where you stand. They don't leave you hanging. Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone has their own way of showing affection. Some people are naturally more laid back, less communicative, and more reserved. But the difference here is consistency. Someone who prioritizes you wants to be with you. They make the effort, even if it's not always easy. They don't keep you on the back burner, wondering when they'll be available next. If you find yourself giving more than you're receiving, if you're always wondering when he'll finally make time for you, that's a huge red flag. It's a clear sign that the relationship isn't as high on his list of priorities as it should be. You deserve someone who's excited to make you a part of their world, not someone who treats you like an afterthought. And here's the hardest part. You have to let go of the fantasy of what could be. Stop holding on to the idea of someone because you see the potential in them. Stop convincing yourself that maybe they'll change. You deserve someone who already sees your worth and makes sure that you never question where you stand with them. So, if you're constantly making excuses for someone who isn't prioritizing you, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are worth being prioritized. Who that? You are worth being cared for. You are worth being someone's first thought, not their last resort. Don't settle for less than that. And here's the good news. When you stop making excuses, when you stop accepting half-hearted effort, you make room for someone who will show up. You make room for someone who understands that love isn't about waiting around or forcing a connection. It's about mutual respect, effort, and being there for each other always. So stop excusing his behavior. If he's not prioritizing you, step back, make room for someone who will.